Alright guys, let's get right into it. The Sony A7 IV is probably one of the best hybrid cameras I've ever used. In fact, I just did a review on this camera. Thank you guys for all the love and support. But after thinking about it, this has been the best camera that I've ever owned in my life, just when it comes to versatility and everything. But because this camera is so good, it really makes me wonder what's next for Sony. What can we possibly see in the Sony A7V that'll make me sell my A7 IV? So in today's video, I decided to do something fun and ask AI to make predictions on what they think will be in the new Sony A7V. And then I'll let you guys know what I think will actually be put into the new camera. And if I'm correct or if AI is correct, if it'll actually be worth the upgrading from something like the Sony A7 IVs. Alright guys, you already know what time it is. If you like content like this, make sure you like and subscribe to your boy. Just show some love, it means a lot. But let's get right back into the video. Okay, so to make this fun, I'm going to use ChatGPT's voiceover option. I'm going to simply ask ChatGPT what she thinks is going to be in the next Sony A75 upgrade, and then we'll talk about it. Hello ChatGPT, are you here with us?
Yep, I'm here. What's up?
So I want to ask you a question for my YouTube audience. I want to know what predictions you have for the new Sony A7V, which wasn't released yet, but is going to be coming out soon.
Great question for your audience. The Sony A7V will likely be the successor to the A7 IV. So here's what I predict based on Sony's recent trends. Sony A7V predictions. 1. Sensor upgrade. 36 megapixels. The A7 IV has 33 megapixels, so we might see a slight bump to 36 megapixels for better detail. It probably won't be stacked to keep costs down, but a faster readout speed could reduce rolling shutter. 2. 4K 60s no crop and 4K 120s cropped. The A7 IV had 4K 60 FPS with a 1.5x crop. Sony will likely remove that crop. 4K 120 FPS? Maybe, but expect it to be cropped to avoid cannibalizing the A7S lineup. 3. AI autofocus and better subject tracking. Sony's recent cameras, A7R5, A9 III, have AI-powered autofocus, so the A7 V should have improved eye and subject tracking for humans, animals, and even vehicles. 4. Upgraded IBIS, 7-8 stops of stabilization. The A7 IV had 5.5 stops of stabilization. Sony will likely push this to 7 to 8 stops for better handheld shooting. 5. Dual CF Express Type A and SD card slots. Faster read-write speeds, similar to the A7S III and A7R6. Better cooling system. Longer recording times in 4K 60fps plus without overheating thanks to improved heat dissipation. 7. Price increase, around $2,800 to $3,000. The A7 IV launched at $2,490, but with AI upgrades and better video features, expect a $300 to $500 increase.
Okay, so I feel like ChatGPT just mentioned a lot, so I'm going to go through it individually and then we'll talk about it. So she talked about a sensor upgrade to 36 megapixels. So instead of the 33 megapixels that's in the A7 IV, 36 megapixels. Right off rip, this would not be enough for me to say I'm willing to sell my A7 IV and upgrade. I do appreciate the, more megapixels, but I feel like 33 is more than enough for you to print, for you to do a lot. So unless I test it out and it has a drastic difference in image quality, which I don't believe it will, that alone would probably not entice me enough. 2, she talks about a 4K 60 frames per second without any crop, and then also adding in a 4K 120 frames per second with a crop factor. I feel like this is actually very realistic and something that we can actually see happen. In my review, I talked about the only downfall to the Sony A7 IV that I found when I first got the camera was the fact that it had that crop factor at 60 frames per second. When I'm shooting a lot of weddings and events or whatever it might be, I shoot at 60 frames per second a lot, especially for the B-roll shots. If I want to get some nice creamy slow motion, I want to make things look dreamy, I shoot at 60 frames per second. And that was one thing I loved about my Sony A7S III. But that was something that I really loved about my Sony A7S III, the fact that I could shoot 60 frames per second without a crop. It was just very, very beautiful image. So them adding that to the A7 IV, I feel like will be a drastic upgrade and something I might consider. I don't know if it's enough to get me to switch yet just based off of that, but it's definitely enticing. And the fact that they're gonna add in 120 frames per second. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I don't usually shoot at 120 frames per second that often. I've done it a few times, and you know, I like getting like that extra slow motion shots. Maybe I'll have more creative work when I decide to do that, but I can do that within my Sony FX6, and I don't use that much, so I don't feel like that's really worth me upgrading and selling my Sony A7 IV. But I feel like those are some really good features, and it seems very enticing. All right, so we talked about adding AI autofocus and better subject detect. So the whole autofocus thing, the AI autofocus thing, honestly, I feel like Sony's autofocus is already amazing, and I guess they can make it better, but them making their autofocus better is not going to entice me to buy another camera, just because I typically like to manually focus anyway. If I'm being 100% real, I came from Blackmagic, and I feel like when you use manual focus, you just get a different feel when it comes to video. I'm talking about now, this could probably be a factor with photographers out there. If you're trying to shoot wildlife, if you're shooting sports and events, and you just need that autofocus, I definitely understand. Even for videographers, if you're shooting sports, I definitely understand it. But for me, for the most part, I'm shooting documentaries, commercial work, corporate work. Having the autofocus that's within the A7 IV and a lot of the other Sony cameras is already good, so I'm pretty much good with that. So I don't feel like this would make me want to switch over, if I'm being 100% real. And then they talked about upgrade IBIS, so 7 to 8 stops of stabilization. Now, this might entice me just because I do love to shoot handheld, but a lot of times I never shoot handheld with mirrorless cameras like this, just because, one, I don't have this like rigged up very heavy, but when I shoot handheld with a camera like this, it's always easy to get camera shakes and stuff like that because the camera isn't that heavy. Most of the times I'm shooting with this camera is usually on a gimbal, if I'm being completely real with y'all. But if they improve it to the point where it's similar to some of, I believe, Lumix, it might be Lumix or Fuji, I can't remember what camera system has amazing in-body stabilization. If you guys know, drop it down in the comment section below. But if they improve it to the point where I can go handheld with a camera like this and not have to deal with a lot of shakiness in the photos, I would definitely consider switching, just because when I travel a lot, you don't want to bring things like gimbals and all this extra stuff, especially if you're trying to travel light. Me and my wife want to do more hiking this year, and just hiking with a whole bunch of gear is literally the worst. So I know all my people that like hike and like to capture adventure stuff, you guys know what I'm talking about. It's a lot. So if they improve the in-body stabilization, maybe I can be enticed, but right now I don't see anything that's making me want to switch. And then it talked about CF Express Type A SD card slots. It talked about having a dual slot, which I was confused on why she said that. This camera already has dual slots, so maybe that was a ChatGPT error. And then lastly, it talked about a better cooling system. Now, I don't believe I'm biased because I've spoken to a lot of people. I've never experienced overheating in my A7 IV. I'm from New Jersey. I've shot weddings in the summer when it was blazing hot. I mean, any camera should have overheated, and my Sony A7 IV did not let me down. It didn't overheat. I overheated, but my camera didn't overheat. So that alone would not entice me to leave, just because I've never dealt with overheating problems. But if you are someone who did deal with overheating, and maybe this is something that is important to you, I can see that being a factor. And then when it comes to the price, it's at around $2,800 to $3,000. I don't feel like that's bad at all. I feel like that is pretty much fair, especially since all of the other cameras are going to get significant upgrades. So the Sony FX3, the Sony FX6, they're all gonna get significant upgrades. Honestly, I feel like the Sony A7S III is kind of done. I feel like the Sony FX3 was the new iteration of the Sony A7S III. So I don't know if we're going to see a Sony A7S IV or anything like that. So maybe the A75 can help a lot of people that's within that market. Maybe you have $2,500, $3,000. You want to invest in a good hybrid camera, but you don't want to only do video, and you want to have that option with photo video. I feel like the A7 IV already tailors to that market heavily, but the A75 probably will be an amazing buy at that point. Now, being completely transparent, if you already own a Sony A7 IV, if these are the only upgrades, I don't feel like this is worth it. I don't feel like it's worth upgrading at that point. Now, maybe, if, for my predictions, if they improve the sensor and the image quality gets a boost, maybe even more dynamic range. I feel like this camera low-key has a lot of dynamic range for a camera like this, but I heard some people talk about back illuminated sensor, whatever that means. At the end of the day, if they improve the sensor on the Sony A7 IV and it actually improves the image quality, then I'll entertain it. But if it's only things that this AI just mentioned, which are a lot of minute differences, I don't feel like it's worth switching. That's just me being real. At the end of the day on this channel, I just want to be transparent as possible. But at the end of the day, we'll never know. We'll never know until Sony drops the A75. One thing I do know for sure, regardless of what specs are put into the A75, I'm at the bare minimum going to rent it and try it out and let you guys know if it's actually worth it from somebody who adores the Sony A7 IV. But like I said, Sony, you did a great job with this camera. Good luck topping it. Before I let you guys go, the upgrade that intrigued me the most was the no crop factor at 60 frames per second. That, if I do ever end up getting a Sony A7V, that will probably be the deciding factor. I love full frame. I don't like the fact that it crops in at 60 frames per second, but I've been able to get amazing footage with that. So hey, it is what it is. Thank you guys for tuning into another video. I really greatly appreciate it. I hope you guys having a good week, and yeah, I'm gonna catch you guys in the next one. I'm out.